At the start of 2021, who would have thought that we'd see Big Show and Mark Henry leave WWE in favour of AEW? Who would imagine that Zelina Vega would walk back down the ramp on WWE Smackdown? Or who could dream that Christian Cage would show up in AEW so soon after making his emotional WWE return at the Royal Rumble? Now more than ever, the possibilities of surprise debuts and returns seem endless, so let's look at 10 of the hottest free agents in wrestling today and dare to dream. Since his WWE release in April 2020, Matt Cardona has chosen to build his character and reputation in various promotions before signing a long-term contract. Though he has the pedigree and standing to challenge for any title in any company, he has instead chosen to remain a free agent while he considers his options. The Long Island native has recently wrestled for AEW, Impact Wrestling, and GCW whilst indulging in online feuds with the likes of EC3 and Nick Gage. His feud with Gage in particular has drawn a lot of attention after successfully blurring the lines between fiction and reality. When discussing WWE's historic misuse of talent, the internet champion is a name near the top of anyone's list, so it's clear that the correct use of the man formerly known as Zack Ryder could see him become a top guy if used correctly by a major promotion, including his former employers. McMahons, Harts, Hennings, and Von Erichs, wrestling is often a family affair. Looking back at the golden era of the WWF, when the British Bulldog stood tall as the beloved fan favourite who people still love to talk about to this very day, it seems strange to think that his son, Davey Boy Smith Jr., hasn't been given a bigger role in WWE. The second generation superstar won 2 tag team titles as part of the Hart dynasty 10 years ago, but never managed to climb the roster as a solo competitor before being released in 2011. Since then, he continued wrestling far and wide, appearing in promotions such as New Japan Pro-Wrestling, Pro Wrestling Noah, and MLW. Surely a more seasoned, mature, and grizzled Davey Boy Smith Jr. deserves a second bite of the cherry in a major American promotion. Unlike other names on this list, Smith has barely been seen by television audiences in recent years, but has shown with his MLW World Title run, he has the credibility to carry the brightest torch that a promotion has to offer. Mickie James was a welcome return to WWE back in November 2016, kickstarting her resurgence with a fine match against the then unbeaten Asuka at NXT TakeOver Toronto. Within a few months, she was back on the main roster, aligning herself as the mischievous sidekick of champion Alexa Bliss, and would spend the next few years either helping her as a heel or unsuccessfully chasing the world title as a face. Unfortunately, James would never reach the heights of her first WWE run or even hold a championship in her arms again. Injuries, a packed roster, and an often vague gimmick all worked against her, and she was eventually released in April 2021. James then quickly made her NWA debut on June 8th later that year, announcing that she'll be producing an all-female event for the promotion, as well as returning to the ring herself. Despite this, Mickie is still free to work elsewhere and would be a thrilling addition to any major or independent promotion in the USA or abroad. Winning the NWA Women's World title, then appearing in AEW isn't out of the question, though Impact Wrestling have recently teased a return for the former Knockouts champion. Wrestling as Tommy End, the much celebrated Dutchman performed extensively on the independents from 2002 to 2016, racking up tournaments and titles aplenty in a glittering global career. After joining NXT in 2016 and being repackaged as Aleister Black, he quickly became one of their top stars, winning the NXT Championship, several end-of-year awards, and even the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic with Ricochet. The clamour for him to be brought up to the main roster was deafening, and in 2019 he appeared on Raw, beating Elias on his debut to the joy of wrestling fans worldwide. Over the following months, he failed to build any momentum, finding himself trapped in the mid-card like many other NXT graduates before and after. Following some uninspiring feuds, sideways drafts, and 6 months off television, Black would return with a slightly reworked gimmick in May of 2021 before being released just a few weeks later. later. He has since stated that his relationship with the company is still good and was told the decision was purely financial. Whether wrestling as Tommy End or Aleister Black, it's clear he still has a lot to give and is well respected by fans, wrestlers and promoters alike. Healthy, talented and an impressive worker, this European superstar would be a welcome inclusion to any promotion worldwide. Impact Wrestling's first female world champion is one of the most puzzling names on this list. After winning the traditionally male belt at Hard to Kill in January 2020, Tessa Blanchard was then stripped of the title when her contract was terminated just 5 days before it was due to expire in June of the same year. Relations between the promotion and their champion had allegedly become strained over both money and some worrying allegations of bullying and racism that had dogged her over recent months. This capped off by her refusal to drop the belt on her way out due to the pandemic. Since then, rumours have circulated about where the daughter of Four Horsemen legend Tully Blanchard will surface next. Joining her father in AEW potentially as the first female member of the Pinnacle would seem like a logical choice, though there's a possibility that Tony Khan's insistence on a happy, progressive locker room would make her a contentious choice for the harmonious promotion. Her pedigree, ability and ruthless personal outlook would certainly impress Vince McMahon, and the WWE's women's division could definitely use some fresh main event talent, as currently it's the same combination of wrestlers being circulated in endless fashion. Ronda Rousey's WWE career from 2018 to 2019 was both fascinating and unique. A genuine athlete and global celebrity prior to her arrival, Rousey delighted and disappointed in equal measure during her rollercoaster ride from stealing the show at WrestleMania 34 to inadvertently catapulting Becky Lynch to superstardom later that year with her inability to portray a likable face champion. In the end, she commendably put the Irish Lass Kicker over with a dubious-looking pin at WrestleMania 35, leaving the door ajar for a return further down the line. It's well known that Rousey didn't like the WWE lifestyle and struggled with the ferocious fan base, so a return during the pandemic while touring and crowds were limited would have made sense. However, having recently announced that she's pregnant in May, any kind of grappling will be taking a back seat for a good few months at least. A return at the next WrestleMania may be possible, potentially for the much anticipated one-on-one rematch with Lynch. A lucrative return to UFC or acting roles in Hollywood are also not out of the question for the former MMA and pro wrestling world champion. Braun Strowman is perhaps the most shocking of all the recent WWE releases, having been Universal Champion as recently as last year. The monster among men suffered from various stop-start pushes and unconvincing face and heel turns during his solo run, going from being the top face in the company to feuding with Saturday Night Live cast members in a bewildering career since leaving the Wyatt family in 2016. Strowman is another wrestler who didn't fail due to his own limitations, but seemingly because the promotion he was contracted to didn't know how to use him. His size, strength and look means he could fit into any card with a basic but believable moveset that could create a marquee match against anyone, anywhere in the world. It's an open secret that he's been in big demand, with MLW in particular reaching out to him. However, he will command a hefty fee, and it's more likely that the man that scouted him for WWE, Mark Henry, who is now with AEW, could persuade him for a meeting with Tony Khan in Jacksonville. Daniel Bryan's incredible career has never gone exactly to plan, with more twists and turns than a Scott Steiner promo. After his seemingly impossible career extension began in 2018, it was generally accepted that the American Dragon would see out his days in WWE, so it was a huge surprise earlier this year when it was announced that he had declined their offer of a new contract, seeking instead to let his deal expire. Speculation remains rife that Bryan could be preparing a farewell tour, having spent so many years on the independent circuit wrestling under his real name Bryan Danielson. He is known to want to wrestle in Mexico and pushed for a WWE New Japan Pro-Wrestling relationship before his release, which shows that he has at least some desire to wrestle there at some point in the future. The leader of the Yes movement would be welcome anywhere he pleases, and money will be less of an issue for a man who remains in love with the sport and who is already set for life. And quickly, just before we continue, make sure you scroll down and drop a like and subscribe with notifications turned on so you don't miss any upcoming wrestling content as we head towards 20,000 subscribers. But now that you've done that, let's get on with the rest of the video. The past has taught us that even the most unlikely returns are possible. Ever since Bret Hart sauntered down the WWE ramp back in 2010, nothing would surprise us. We've been blessed over recent years to see many retired wrestlers come back from seemingly career-ending injuries, so what's a court case or two between friends? CM Punk left WWE in 2014, and despite mass calls for his return, he's still yet to show up in any significant capacity. Punk is now 42 years old, so if he were to return to the ring, it would be advisable that it be sooner rather than later. Though perfectly happy pursuing outside interests such as writing comics, MMA commentary, and acting, let's not forget that Punk did make a shocking return to wrestling twice already, bursting through the stage doors of a Fox studio set to become a regular guest on their WWE Backstage show, and not only that, but he made an extremely short appearance under a mask on an indie show in 2019, hitting a GTS. His fiery exit aside, surely the voice of the voiceless wants to end his career he spent so many years building on a high. AEW could provide the perfect platform for a short-term run before a final definitive career send-off at WrestleMania, perhaps allowing him the chance to finally headline at the grandest stage of them all. Brock Lesnar is the biggest, most consistent draw on the list, and if there's one thing you can be sure about with Brock, it's to expect the unexpected. Lesnar has been oddly quiet during the pandemic, having not wrestled since March 2020, where he dropped the belt to the emerging top babyface Drew McIntyre. The longer he stays away, the bigger the clamour comes for his return. Love him or loathe him, there will always be a place for him on any wrestling card, and he adds legitimacy and believability every time he shows up. AEW's Tony Khan is known to be a fan, and remember, he has wrestled outside of WWE before during his questionable run in New Japan as IWGP Heavyweight Champion in the mid-2000s. His UFC run also shows that he's willing to step outside his comfort zone to embrace a new challenge, but let's be honest, WWE are the only ones likely to want to pay his extraordinary salary. And if you're interested in more videos from me, make sure you check out my Jon Moxley documentary where I chronicle his AEW World Championship reign.